So in America, we always hear about the newest billionaire that's been created, especially in the past couple years through tech, but we never tend to hear about families that have been basically compromised when it comes to their business because of that boom. When a billionaire rises, it tends to be someone else falls. And I'm not saying in this circumstance here that this family is eventually going to lose their generational wealth. They're actually going to get more generational wealth and actually be allowed to pivot from their original business. And who am I talking about? Is the family that basically owns the majority shares of Paramount Plus. Now, in the curious case of Shari Redstone and her family, which her father actually founded out, I believe, CBS, Viacom. He pretty much passed away a few years ago, and she inherited his shares, which is about 77%. But right now, the media landscape is actually in a transition in which owning a lot of these studios and putting out these content and streaming services, it's actually not getting the same amount of return as it once was. You see, in a way, it's almost like the bundling of cable. The way they used to bundle all these channels, they used to force feed customers into getting certain packages. And a lot of, media conglomerates like ESPN, they were eating really well off of that. I mean, shit, you had your grandmother paying an extra $40 to $50 on her cable bill, and she doesn't even watch ESPN. But ESPN is bundled up with a bunch of other channels that she really got cable for. So she was kind of forced to pay that extra money. So those days are kind of dwindling down as a lot of people unsubscribe from cable, and it's affecting these big industry players. Now, Shari Redstone was on Time magazine as one of the most influential people in the world, and she definitely is. When you think about like who's controlling the dial in the TV land / Hollywood, her family is up there. You look at Paramount Plus, just what they control. Of course, the streaming services Paramount Plus, the movie channel, TV land. And interesting enough, with the bundling of the cable packages, a lot of their channels like MTV2, they used to force the cable companies to get this. Like, you could even look at Disney. They used to force, I would say, the cable companies to get ABC. Even though they didn't want it, they would tie the NBA finals to that channel. Yeah, that used to be a nice little finesse for these cable companies or just these studio networks to do. If they had a product that was on demand, for example, like CBS could say, we're having the Emmys on this channel, but the red carpet event is going to be on another sub channel that's only on cable. So they would force these cable companies like Comcast, Time Warner, etc., to get both and to bundle them in one package for the customer. So if they want this channel, they got to get the other. I'm just using that as an example, but that's a hustle that a lot of these big networks / studios used to do. And those days are running out. So all that Nickelodeon teen channel that this family owns, MTV, MTV Plus, Cartoon Network, like a lot of people don't want these bundles anymore. And in this era of direct to consumer, this family's really gonna go through it. So in the curious case of Miss Redstone right here, we're gonna hear a segment where they actually kind of break down what's going on with this family. And once again, in America, we never tend to hear about this. We always hear about the rise of how this guy became a billionaire, but we never hear about the families who go from millionaires to middle class or whatever. It happens on every level. For every person that rise, there are families that come down. I'm not saying this circumstance, this family is coming down, but they're going to have to transition that family wealth, that power that they have, that they control so many networks. They're going to have to transition and put that money elsewhere. And how quickly tech moves, I don't think they saw this coming. A whole generation of a certain audience has been almost reconditioned to adjust the way they consume television or just programming through the, I would say, the Netflix effect, where they actually pay for it directly. And unfortunately for Paramount in this circumstance, Netflix don't really have to do business with them. People subscribe for Netflix. They don't subscribe for Netflix to watch their favorite NBC or CBS shows. But anyway, back to this, you guys check out this segment, and every once in a while, I'm gonna check in.
I think we're still somewhat early in the process, I'm told, of the exchange of information. This is a messy transaction for a number of reasons. It is a complicated deal. You have an entity called National Amusements, which is a holding company that is owned by Shari Redstone. That holding company owns the controlling shares of Paramount Global, 77% of the voting control. The deal will be, if it happens, with Ellison, who's backed by Redbird Capital, private equity firm. There's already an investor in there of KKR, which is another huge private equity firm. The deal, as discussed, I'm told, is sort of a two-part deal. Part one would be that there would be an acquisition of National Amusements, and that, I believe, would give Shari Redstone cash. And I think she may need cash because she has taken out debt recently against NAI. I believe she has a tax bill that is due for the shares that she inherited from her father when he passed away. So that may be another reason she needs them. So that
Once again, we never really get to see a family that comes from that type of generational wealth make a transition. So her father passed away, she got the shares, and now I guess her tax bill is due. So right now there's vultures surrounding her as the industry that family makes money off of is dwindling down and it's being reshaped. So they're circling around her like vultures, understanding that she has a deal with the NFL. So they're trying to buy her real estate for pennies on the dollar.
in theory, would be a cash deal, which would be separate from the second part of the transaction. And I'm told the NAI deal is contingent upon the second part of the transaction. How?
Wow, a cash deal. On this type of level, to take a cash deal, we talking about $1 billion company with National Amusement. Their shares are worth billions. And I could only imagine a tax bill on that. But once again, at some point, she's going to have to transition a lot of that money elsewhere to ensure that the generational wealth that family continues to get out of owning Paramount and CBS and Viacom, it continues flowing to the next generation. This transition is very interesting to watch because this family did not foresee that the whole media landscape will be kind of, I don't want to say tumbling down, but going through a transition like this.
Second part of the transaction would work. I don't know. And I think they're still exploring variations. But the point of it would be to merge Skydance, the studio, with the Paramount studio. The question, I think, is well, what happens to the rest of Paramount Global? I'm talking about the Paramount Plus streaming service, the dying linear cable networks, CBS.
Which all those entities are very expensive to run and own. Like they just cost a lot of money. You got to have payroll. You got to have offices in LA and New York. Mainly her piece of real estate that involves with the NFL, CBS, is really what they want. The rest of all that old networking program, especially from CBS, that's an old fucking network, man. Generationally, like that shit don't translate. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this pivot happens.
It's unclear to me if Skydance even wants the rest of that. So the various different options here could be one, they work out some sort of deal where Skydance and Paramount Studio merge. I guess Skydance would acquire Paramount Studio. That could be one way of doing it. They pay a big price. That money goes to the Paramount Global shareholders. And then the remainder of Paramount Global just exists as a publicly traded company.
Now, who the fuck is going to want to buy that? That's the point. Like, who the hell is going to want that? If you take the best part of Paramount and sell it off, which is the part that has that NFL deal attached to it, the rest of that, part of Paramount as a separately publicly traded company, nobody's going to want that. That's a dying piece of real estate. And nobody's going to come in and buy a bunch of shares for all those networks that are dying. Especially with the audience overall. The audience has been conditioned through Netflix of consuming these type of products differently. The only way for them to kind of rescue themselves is if they had a streaming service, which they should have been did that years ago. And just them having a streaming service alone is expensive. Netflix being first one to the marketplace is actually a good thing because now, in a way, it makes it easier for them to dominate. It's anything like a car rental company like Hertz, or just what's the other one? It's Hertz and Enterprise. They actually were the first ones out to market. So when people think of car rental, they instantly think of that. Same thing applies for streaming. When they instantly think of streaming, they instantly think of Netflix.
Not a great outcome for Paramount Global shareholders because they're left with a company whose best asset has been extracted, and now it's all these dying assets that are left over. So, from what I'm told, the Paramount Global shareholder base hasn't been happy with that outcome, if they have a say in the matter at all here. And that's why there's been explorations of, well, how about a larger take private, or maybe all of Paramount Global can be taken private. The problem there is that it's really expensive to do that. And I think there's a lot of camps that are like, well, this is a melting iceberg. Why would we pay a big premium for this whole thing if we can just wait and it will be worth a lot less several years down the road?
Facts. And the fact that she needs money, aka she needs cash right away to pay off that tax bill, it shows you like not only she has to pay off that tax bill, she has to maintain all those entities, that Comedy Central studio, pay the people's salary, their medical benefits, their pension. All these things cost a bunch of money to maintain. It's almost like having a fucking Maybach that's old as hell and you're trying to pay for the maintenance and insurance. After a while, it's like, bro, just give it up already. It's like it's not even worth it. You drive it like 2 times a year. You know what I mean? Like it becomes like that old car that's just killing you in a way.
You've got that going, but at the same time, you have a motivated seller in Shari Redstone. So that's why this is so messy and complicated, and I'm not really sure how it's going to turn out yet. I mean, CBS owes $2 billion a year every year for the NFL. That's already a problem based on the market cap size of the company. There are a lot of questions about, can this company even pay the NFL by the end of this deal? I've heard that.
Yo, that is crazy. They owe more money than their market cap. Wow. That is a conundrum in itself. But the funny thing is that without the NFL deal in place, like I would just say in my estimate, that drops about 50% of the worth of just having Paramount. It drops it like, I'm just being generous. It drops to about 50%, but that's a generous number. I would say way more than that. The real estate she's trying to sell right now is really access to just having NFL programming.
Bandied about several times. So if you're now going to extract the Paramount studio from it, I mean, I'm not, again, you'd have to pay such a huge price for Paramount in order to allow the company sort of to pay off the NFL. Maybe that will happen. I don't know, but there's no question that Paramount Global at this point is in a situation that borders on dire, I would say, and in large part because of that NFL deal. They have a lot of money that's due. The stock price seems to be going down and down rather than up and up. So there would need to be sort of a complete revaluation of the media industry, I think, in order to keep Paramount Global afloat for years to come, so that they would be in a healthy situation to pay off all the money that they owe for sports rights down the road.
And unfortunate for them, you could look at what's going on with ESPN, how they collaborated with Discovery, also Turner Sports. They're all going to come out with their own streaming network. So some of their rivals have actually collaborated to kind of fight against this. Once again, that whole industry is going through a shift, and this is one of the worst times to be in a situation where you have to sell.
And I will say that people, even at the time, sort of were like, is this company going to be able to afford this? Like, people even at the time saw the media landscape shifting. And I think the point, to your point, the point people made then was, but they need the NFL. Like, if they're going to exist, they need this. They can't just bow out. Because if they bow out, they're also in a terrible situation. So,
God damn, that shit keeps getting worse and worse. And remember, the NFL is like one of the best pieces of real estate to have on live television. I mean, what? They're like the #1 programming on like streaming, on 5 different networks, on everything. Like even YouTube, they're killing it. It's just a real important piece of real estate. And without that in place, just the CBS part of the deal with the NFL, if they lose that because they can't make their payments, it's over. That whole company becomes fucking almost worthless.
At least try to kick the can down the road, get the NFL, use the NFL to try to get as many programming increases on retransmission fees as you can.
which is a dying business. That retransmission fee is a dying business. And the cable operators are hip and up to that game. They're no longer accepting that. Once again, that transmission fee example is like ESPN saying, hey, we're going to broadcast the NBA, but you also have to bundle in ABC because they get the NBA finals. You see what I'm saying? So those days are over. Right now, ESPN is even trying to sell off ABC because that's not going to work for them, especially on the local networks. The cable companies are no longer accepting that. And that's why we've seen Charter actually tell their customers to go for other streaming services to get sports. That's how much the cable industry is pretty much had it up to here, because them passing the cost along to their customers is causing them to lose customers. And they actually make a lot of money by just having internet only customers versus paying for TV rights, paying for networks. It's a lot of headache.
Linear side, and then maybe push people toward Paramount Plus on the streaming side, because if you have the NFL, it's by far your best asset. And I think that's true. All you need to do is look at the ratings for NFL games. Like, they keep going up and up and up, whereas the ratings for almost everything else on linear TV goes down. So that's the bind that CBS was in. Either way, there was going to be an issue. The expectations have been lowered enough on the business that Comcast just released its quarterly earnings. The stock went up fairly significantly because it beat expectations. But, like, the fundamentals, I think, are worrying. Both on the media side and the cable side, frankly, where there's still broadband subscribers where the company is losing high-speed broadband subscribers, which was this huge growth business for years and years and years.
That was really the main business. I mean, right now, that was the fucking main business. A lot of these companies, especially ESPN, and we're seeing the fallout from that. Once again, them having your fucking grandma pay $50 extra on her cable bill. There's no real demand. We've seen CNN actually try to remove themselves. Well, they're still in the business of just a cable bundle, but they try to go out on their own to direct to consumer. And what happened after 1 month when they launched their app? They had to close it because in reality, they had to deal with their real demand, which was virtually non-existent. So how does a fucking billion-dollar company or a multi-million-dollar company like CNN venture out on their own, go direct to consumer, and have nothing to show for it? A lot of these legacy media companies are operating under some sort of loophole or just roundabout way that they figured out to get money from. That, especially when television was just being established maybe 50, 60 years ago. And this is also playing out on the radio side, or just, I would say, the broadcast wave side of just the whole industry. You see Sirius XM, when they established themselves, it was good to have exclusive radio, I guess, in cars because there wasn't really that much options. But the more cars get more technology based, like how Elon Musk introduced the car buying audience to having technology in their car as far as hooking up their phones, being able to play Spotify or Apple Music into their cars. Now we're going to see the serious side of the business kind of operate like a zombie company, almost like a legacy company in a way, because the more the audience gets tailored into getting accustomed to, oh, I could just hop in my car and play my playlist or listen into whatever podcast I want. That audience that Sirius had that had to pay to get a device in their car, it's going to start dwindling down naturally. So once again, there's a lot of companies operating like zombies right now. And we're going to see within the next 2 to 3 years, the fallout from a lot of it. What, Sirius Radio just lost 450 subscribers in the past year for 2023. That's a lot. Pandora is struggling, which is, a subdivision of their company. That app used to be killing it, but they try to evolve into something else. But at the same time, they don't tailor themselves to the current landscape, which you can't offer exclusive radio and then exclude a bunch of podcasts when people have the podcast app built into their phone as soon as they buy it. You're missing out on that. They should have came up with a program to team up with a lot of podcasters to give them distribution. But once again, failure to innovate.
Such a good business for Comcast that really protects NBC Universal. And that's been the thesis of Comcast, which is like, look, if NBC Universal is a vulnerable media company like these other ones, like Paramount Global, it doesn't matter because it's protected by big Comcast, and big Comcast is doing fine, and Brian Roberts loves the media business, so this works.
Once again, that's them assuming that the new generation, the new audience of just cable consumption or just media consumption is used to just, hey, we'll just get a cable bill when we move into our house and get our big screen TV. They don't understand that that audience has been reprogrammed into a different way of consuming just media in general. They're used to subscribing to subscription services. They'll move into a brand new house, buy a big screen TV, and then have a little Roku box built in, or just get a little Amazon Fire Stick, and then they'll purchase those streaming services. And a lot of Comcast business model is just built on them just getting the original cable packages to access ESPN, them sitting in front of their televisions at 9 p.m. Once again, all that shit is antiquated now. People don't sit in front of their TVs and flick through channels. They actually search on what they want to see, when they want to see it. They're used to pausing it. It's just a different way the audience has been reconditioned to consume media. It's going to affect their business model.
There's in essence, like a sugar daddy for NBC Universal. But if the Comcast business, the cable business, isn't doing as well, I think there are people out there. So this works.
I like to call it the Chipotle effect. When people started going to Chipotle and ordering things the way they wanted, all of a sudden a lot of fast food chains started customizing their menu, allowing for more choices. So the typical fast food customer slowly got reconditioned into getting certain meals the way that they want. It's the same thing when it comes to streaming.
There's in essence, like a sugar daddy for NBC Universal. But if the Comcast business, the cable business, isn't doing as well, I think there are people out there that wonder if Brian Roberts might decide, like it doesn't make any sense for me to own NBC Universal, which has problems of its own. And its main problem is, what do you do when you have all of these linear cable networks, almost all of them, that are not doing as well as they used to because of the secular declines of linear TV? You can make an argument Bravo is still, is maybe the best of the worst there for NBC Universal. And the strategy for all the media companies has been, well, we'll develop our own streaming service. But Peacock continues to just lose money, and a lot of money. I mean, Peacock lost $825 million last quarter. That's better than it was. It lost almost $1 billion a year ago.
Once again, streaming is really expensive. That's why the pivot is crazy. It takes years of perfecting that business model. As we've seen Disney go up and down ever since they launched their streaming service, trying to perfect the price point, the type of programming. You can't just say we're a legacy business. We have years of programming. Let's just build up a streaming service and just the audience can automatically gravitate towards. There has to be a reconditioning of that audience to your streaming service.
It is losing less, but it's still losing a lot of money. And it has 31 million subscribers. Netflix has like 260 million subscribers globally. Not an apples to apples thing. But the point is that this is not a scaled streaming service. This is not the answer, at least not yet.
And I wonder with Netflix how many employees they really have as far as, film crew or just people producing these movies and television shows. A lot of the actors are just getting one-time payouts. See, with CBS and all these legacy media companies, they got guys on salaries, guys who just been clicking one button on the camera, paying them like 80 grand a year plus benefits plus pension. It's a weird thing going on. And I just think the whole business model of just having all that staff is slowly phasing out, and we could see it play out no further than the writer's strike. It's just having them on payroll and giving them royalty checks. It's just the whole industry and landscape it's changing, and carrying that much weight, that much overhead in your business, it just doesn't make sense right now.
NBC Universal. So yeah, I think NBC Universal has its own issues. And they're also in that just general media bucket of like, well, will the protector hang on to it? That's what I think. I'm an NBC Universal employee, disclosure. Like, I think a lot of employers hope that's the outcome, that Brian Roberts has a real long view on this, and that he just sees this as maybe a moment in time and just hold on to the business, and eventually we'll figure something out, either with a merger if he acquires a company, or will transition the business over time in some way. There's another outcome.
Their competitors are also merging already. Once again, ESPN, Discovery, and Turner Sports all merged already. So that's a conundrum in itself right there.
He decides, I've had enough of this, and I'm going to spin off NBC Universal and David Zaslav and Warner Brothers. Congratulations. You can now run a bigger media company. And then NBC Universal doesn't have its protector anymore, and it's just out there as another media company. And I would say, from at least a employee standpoint, that is the worst of the two outcomes. I don't think any of them are in particularly good shape. I suppose you could argue that Sony is in okay shape because they've been an arms dealer and they never made a streaming service, so they haven't lost any money. But like that, even Sony Pictures is just sort of a subsidiary of the larger Sony, which is a Japanese company. So I don't even know that I would put them in the same bucket. All of the legacy media companies have major issues because they're all publicly traded companies, and Wall Street demands growth, and they have a huge declining linear business, all of them. So they're all stuck. So unless they can quickly get streaming going so that it looks something more like what Netflix looks like,
which takes years, by the way. Keep that in mind. It takes years to become Netflix. Disney is learning the hard way.
Now, they're not in a great situation, and that's the case for Disney. That's the case for Warner Brothers Discovery. Again, NBC Universal is protected, so in that sense, the Wall Street's focus is not really on NBC, which is good for NBC. When I talk to executives at some of the legacy media companies, not Netflix, they push hard on a streaming bundle. Like they want one, and they want one because if there was some sort of discounted price, then all of a sudden I think people would to get.
Once again, they're struggling to operate outside of that cable bundle business,
where all of these companies can, to avoid and figure out the right economics. Because from Netflix's standpoint, Netflix is like, well, why do I need to do a deal with any of you guys? I mean, I'm the one that everybody wants, not you. So
facts. Ironic enough with Netflix, anytime someone does a movie on there, whether it be Will Smith or just Dave Chappelle, if you notice, the whole Netflix brand is the one that ends up getting the most promotion. It's not necessarily the actor. It's the entity of Netflix gets promoted. Hey, Dave Chappelle did a Netflix special. The brand tends to get promoted way more than the actual creator or just a celebrity star. That's why you don't see any new big name Hollywood stars like you once did, even I would say 20 years ago or even 10 years ago.
To do a bundle with you, the economics need to be shifted as such, where I'm at least getting the bulk of the revenue here. We can't do something where there's some sort of like equal revenue share, because people want Netflix a lot more than they want Peacock. You would think that these companies would say, okay, we gave it a go. We gave it a go on our own. Like, time for phase 2 here, where we're able to limit churn and add more subscribers by coming up with something that's a little bit more consumer friendly that could also benefit the legacy media companies. So that has not happened still yet, but I think a lot of the executives are waiting for it and hope it happens in 2024.
That's one hell of a conundrum, man. They don't really have any idea how to innovate, and them just having a bunch of, I would say, content, quote unquote. And that's another trick of the game. The word content can mean you dropping one song. It could mean you producing a whole movie. It could mean anything. You just doing a TikTok clip. That's another trap of their whole industry, is that tech has slowly devalued their product. It sort of put it in a box altogether. So a big studio like CBS could produce a whole NFL show or just game. They produce it, but it's counted as content. The same way like a 16-year-old will make a TikTok video. That's another trick of the trade. But overall, that industry, it takes years of developing those streaming services. They can't just make one overnight and all of a sudden they're going to be profitable, because you have to condition your audience to just automatically gravitating it and consuming it from a streaming standpoint. You have to develop certain personalities within that network. CNN, once again, they tried it. They paid a lot of money to bring in certain personalities, and it did not translate to success because, once again, their success is tied into that legacy bundling business of cable, and streaming is completely different. So Netflix right now is starting to acquire live sports, and their first test run is the WWE wrestling events. So they acquired their TV rights or whatever for a number of years. And if it proves to be successful, I expect Netflix to keep going at it and try to acquire more live events. It doesn't necessarily have to be sports, but once they start acquiring live events, you're going to start to see CBS be even in a tighter stranglehold because that's their main bread and butter. And if it proved to be successful on streaming, with tech companies like Netflix having less overhead, it's a matter of time before they start making crazy bids for the same type of events CBS gets, like the Emmys, etc. So we're starting to see the tech companies take live events and merge them into the word quote unquote content.
I don't really see how this deal, which is a 10-year deal worth $5 billion for rented live sports entertainment, that's what they're calling it, rights, is any different than what a traditional TV sports rights deal would be. Co-CEO Ted Sarandos went on the conference call and said, well, no, this is sports entertainment and the drama is the event and therefore it's more core to us. I couldn't really follow the logic of that. To me, professional sports is drama also. So I just don't see from a logic standpoint why this is all that different from any traditional sports rights deal. And it really seems to me like it's a way where Netflix can test it out, see if it works, see how many customers sign up for their advertising tier, see how many people watch it without ads, and then Netflix can say, okay, this worked or this didn't work, or there's more information and we'll figure it out. And then it's just a precursor to a more traditional sports deal. Maybe I would believe Netflix a little bit more if they hadn't also gone back on their word about advertising and password sharing. And like this has become sort of a thing now for Netflix to decide, like we reserve the right to change our mind.
So there you have it. Looks like Shari Redstone has a hell of a pivot under her belt because unfortunately for her, due to tech evolving, it's actually causing her media empire, which was expected to be generational wealth generated for her family way after she's gone, and even her father who founded the company way after he's gone. It turns out it's not going to be like that. They're going to have to pivot their money, kind of almost in a way scrape what they can, what's left of the company. And this is the type of disruption tech really causes. And this is only the beginning, as this is going to affect a lot of industries beyond just entertainment. The college system overall, especially in this country, a lot of it could be automated online, as we've seen it kind of play out during the 2020 pandemic. That only accelerated a lot of these colleges beginning to close down. Once again, behind the curtain, you'll be surprised how in this country there's a lot of million-dollar companies, man, billion-dollar company, just operating on a house of sticks.